I was very disappointed, really, with the quality of the recording, the transmission of this evening's Mass, for which I can only apologise. But I was also sad because what I was trying to speak about, I think, at least for me, carried some significance, and so I've taken it upon myself to try and run through the essence of what I was speaking about in the homily, this time recording it on my iPad in the hope that it could somehow be transferred onto our parish website or back onto Facebook in a way that will make it accessible to those who wish to listen to what I had to say tonight. You will recall that the Mass was the third Sunday of Easter time, and we heard the gospel of the walk to Emmaus and how the disciples had not first recognized the risen Christ walking alongside them, and only as if their eyes were opened at the moment when their strange guest at supper broke the bread. What I took my cue from was an opening quote from the Mass, which I quoted from Simone Weil, and the words I used at the start of Mass were just the first line of this quote. She said, or wrote, "With imagination, you don't have to travel far to find God." And so in my introduction to Mass, I was just making the connection between the fact, the very real fact, that we're not currently able to travel very far at all unless we've got particular and pressing business to attend to, which is acceptable to the wider society. And that includes not currently being able to access our places of worship, our churches, the places we associate most obviously and understandably with God. I'm just going to switch this on now. Sorry about that. Technical problems today all around the place. So I was saying that it's a comforting thing to be reminded of the fact that it is not just in churches, of course, where God is present to us, although we do truly believe that the Lord is present in the Blessed Sacrament, truly sacramentally present in our churches and in the tabernacle, the place where we would come to pray at quiet moments as we also gather for our Eucharistic celebrations. So there's comfort in that we can access God and God can access us everywhere. But I'm going to then continue. This is what I did with the homily that unfortunately didn't come across at all clearly. So just to give the full quote. With imagination, you don't have to travel far to find God. Only notice things. She goes on. For the finite and the infinite live in the same place. It is here alone, at this precarious and vital point, that the holy secret is laid bare. She concludes this section. And so I live in this world by attention. So she's got this gift for not just going through life without noticing what's occurring, as they say in Wales. She sees deeper, perhaps, than is the case for many of us. It's as if we've left behind our capacity that we had in childhood to perceive a deeper level of reality. We get caught up in the humdrum of daily life, but she's saying the finite and the infinite live in the same place. So just as God is dwelling in the Eucharistic elements in the church, so God dwells within us in our own homes, within the sacramental situation of a married couple, for instance, but also in our baptism, all of us baptized. Sacramental presences of God wherever we are. I was interested in this at the precarious and vital point. I mean, that's where we are, aren't we? We're living simultaneously in a precarious time. We're anxious about what's going on, things we cannot, beyond our control, things that even experts don't seem to have a handle on at this moment, and politicians are struggling to come up with appropriate policies and provide the right equipment, etc., etc. Precarious times. But simultaneously, it's a vital time, not in the vitalness as necessary, but vital as in alive. People are discovering about themselves things which have perhaps been under the surface for a while. We're discovering gifts we've got, discovering relationships we have, we're discovering capacity for inventiveness, creativity, resourcefulness. So it's a vital time as it is a precarious time. And it's here, she suggests, in these kind of situations that the holy secret is laid bare, as if that which we're yearning for in faith is actually brought closer to us at times like this. So the thing is for us all to try and live with greater attention to what's going on. And it was in this context that I began to speak about someone. And I want to speak about someone who is of this place, our community here, Latchford, Grappenhall, and the surrounding area, Warrington. So our place, but also someone who is of our community, not currently living in the community, but most certainly of our community. So let me begin like this. Back in 2009, some of you may recall that we held a service of dedication and blessing on the site where the church now stands. We held a service in which we estimated where the altar would be, the tabernacle would be, the amber would be, the font would be, the welcome area would be, and we blessed those areas. We had a specific prayer to try and focus on what those areas would be to us once our new church was up and running. And as part of that ceremony, I invited a number of parishioners, just representatives really of different constituencies, so to speak. And one of the people who and they were digging just a turf of the ground, a sort of a ceremonial first turf being dug, the first sod of soil, before the contractors moved in, I think the very next day. And one of the people who dug a sod of oil on our behalf, that very September began his studies at Cambridge University, from where he 3 years later emerged with a first-class honours degree. Subsequently, he continued his education by taking an MA, followed very swiftly by a PhD, a doctorate, at Liverpool University, and is currently doing some postdoctoral research based in Dublin, but also taking him to other places. Meanwhile, he's been writing poetry, I believe, for quite some time. Began when he was a younger student at school. And he's just had published some of his poetry. It's been really rather well received. He had a Facebook launch because they couldn't have a proper launch the other day in terms of everybody being in the same room, press conference and the like. And he also appeared on the Front Row programme on Radio 4. As I appeared, he was part of that programme. So his material is clearly being recognised by some as having a quality which is deserving of our attention. And that's the point, attention again. If you read, and I'll give you the name, it's Sean Hewitt. If you read his poetry, you'll discover in a man who's, well, I don't know his precise age, but I'm guessing late 20s, just, I won't go any higher, Sean, later 20s now, as yet perceived, I imagine from a very early age, his love of nature is absolutely present in all his writings. His perception of a sort of a depth and an inner communication that's available to us in when we're out and about in nature. But at the same time, as beautifully conveying his relationship, shall I put it that way, with nature. He's also done something utterly courageous to my mind. He's incorporated within his poetry, I'm going to say confessional, not in a churchy way, but in a way of just acknowledging aspects of life where there's been a struggle. Now, it happens to be a struggle that all of us, in some form or other, have to go through, especially in our teenage years when the hormones are coursing through our veins. We're discovering ourselves, our bodies change, and we find ourselves who we are attracted to, and maybe engage in some sort of experiment to discover more about that side of our nature. And it's all about moving towards accepting, receiving, celebrating, enjoying, living the gift of human intimacy, which is a gift from God, sometimes narrowly interpreted by certain people in churches and religious communities as being purely about procreation. But no, it's a gift that is part of ourselves and part of how we communicate with one another, and particularly those to whom we are drawn into intimate relationship, please God, lifelong partnerships. But Sean, as I say, very courageously, and I say that with no hesitation or caveat at all, shared in his poetry in quite candid detail to some eyes and ears, his own struggles with coming to terms with his sexuality and being attracted to those of the same sex, and his experimentation, his seeking some sort of way of finding his way to living and expressing his nature and his attractiveness or attraction to men, etc. And he does that with the same candidness, the same observation, the same attention to detail, the same insight into what's going on. I say insight, it's also the questions are still alive, they're not answered. He's not the sort of person who would presume to my reading want to give a definite answer to things, but but the beautiful thing is Sean has this magical, and I know he uses that term, way of bringing together these two aspects of observation of how he perceives nature and observation of how he perceives himself to be. Now, I'm going to pause there. Yeah, supper is being prepared, and I forgot I'd put the timer on a piece of chicken. So Sean has written this poetry. He's also incorporated, and again, this is incredibly courageous, but also magnificently delivered reflections on the experience, not just his own personal. I think he's voiced the experience of his family. He's found a way as an individual of bringing their whole experience of the loss of their dad, so tragically last year. But returning to the poetry and the way of introducing his own emerging sense of who he is, the integrity of his life as a person, with his lifelong sense of presence in nature. He writes this poetry, and so I did read tonight, and I want to read to you a section of one of his poems, and it's called Petition. Now, the beautiful thing in this poem to me is the way he draws these two together. There isn't a commentary from Sean with the poem, so I'm going to have to try and give some sort of sense of interpretation to it. But it begins with him going into this. I'm still guessing kind of a wooded area, because a lot of what it speaks about takes place in wooded areas at twilight. But he goes into this, but there's clearly a pool that he's familiar with, that place he goes to. So it's a place of where he retreats to, like we do. We've got places we go where we're trying to work something out. Sean, at one stage in life, I guess, this pool, I get drawn to water too. But he goes, and what's beautiful, again, he doesn't just sort of go and dip his toe in or just look along the bank. He gets down. You know, when animals come to drink from the water at the side, it's that sort of crouching, you imagine the way he describes it. And he could observe at sort of almost duck level what's going on around, including the fishermen opposite. But then it occurs to his mind, either at the time or subsequently in connection with this experience in the pool, where he's come to sort of understand himself better, accept himself better, perhaps love himself. But while he's there, or subsequently, as I say, he recalls a visit to Lourdes. He obviously went on a pilgrimage to Lourdes, and this is where the poem takes up. I'd like to read this, if I may. Remembering, of course, that Lourdes is associated with water, great, very cold water that comes down from the Pyrenees. Once, I queued for the baths at the sanctuary of Lourdes, was sent to a room full of frail men undressing. Just a damp white curtain between us, and the icy water rising up from the Gave de Pau. The deep chant of a Latin rosary, how a French voice called to me. Two men inside, a crucifix on the wall above the stone bath. My towel taken off. I was given instead a sheet of cotton to wrap around myself, as though to reassure me that I could be loved when all my parts were bound together. All I can remember now is being held, one hand on my chest, another pressed to my back, the slow meeting of water over my body, how the rhythm of the voices and the river seemed to reassemble my life around me. Anybody who's been to Lourdes will recognise, or has submitted themselves to the chilling experience of the baths, will recognise that scene. The sort of matter-of-factness of the changing rooms, no sort of privacy really at all. But even then, these burly or these volunteers doing the actual ducking of people under are very slapdash about it, very matter-of-fact. You sort of take your towel off and you wrap this piece of cloth around you. And I just love the way Sean talks. I mean, it's almost like the simultaneously that all right, body's being exposed, and then we've got to. This is the Catholic we've got to wrap it all up again, and my parts. I can be loved, and my parts are all bound up. But what grows out of that is that sense of that. Also, that background chant, the Latin rosary, the French voices of summons, then submitting himself trustfully to the hands of these strangers, who one hand on front, one on the back, then take him back down. The Bible will leave, and he's under that cold water, back up again, and that's it. But he's been brought. I mean, that it's not just his parts that are being wrapped up in that white cloth. It seems to me, because he also says that the water. There's this thing about the magic, the mystery of what water can achieve. The rhythm of the voices, human part there, and the river seemed to reassemble my life around me. I mean, what do we seek if we go on pilgrimage, particularly to Lourdes? We're seeking, if we're sincere, quite often our own healing, discovering our own integrity or reconnecting with our integrity, wholeness of life. It's not just physical healings, but emotional, mental, spiritual healing of. And the greatest healing any of us can receive, first of all, is to accept and love ourselves. And then, through that love, express our love to others, and then our love of God. This is Jesus. This is the golden rule: treat others as we would want to be treated ourselves. So, Sean, I think what I said at Mass tonight, I don't know whether this bit was messed about with, but I see God's grace at work in a life like Sean's, no less, perhaps even more, than in my life as a sort of official minister of religion. Sean has managed to bring things together. He connects. And religion, at its best, religion means bind together, brings things together. Sean has done that so with such great craft, great sincerity, great mastery of language. But in doing so, he's reconnecting himself to the world, those who are willing to walk with him, connecting us to understanding ourselves that bit better and accepting ourselves that bit better. So, as I say, a good poet, a good artist connects, whereas so many of us find it necessary to compartmentalise our lives because there are aspects we're too ashamed of, we're unsure about the reception in communities, in families. Well, here's a young man as brave as any I have witnessed in terms of this kind of aspect of life, and I want to pay tribute to Sean and to his family, to say that to my mind I've always been and always will be part of our community, wherever you happen to be. I wish you well, I wish you joy, I wish you fulfillment. I wish you the respect, you acceptance and understanding that you, like any of us, are due. And I wish to hear so much more of your gift crafted into poems and the like. And I went on from that to sort of draw a point about the disciples on that road and how they struggled to accept what was going on in their lives. They were running away from something. They were unsure. They were despondent, downcast. They were even, they were just trusting any sort of thing that they'd heard. They just witnessed. They thought they'd witnessed the end, whereas in fact it was a beginning. And it was only in that moment of insight at the breaking of the bread that they realised that, and their joy began to be unlocked, and then shared, and then travelled 2 centuries on, 2 millennia on. We're still hearing their witness. And I then completed it then with a quote about sacramentalism, not being, as I say, just magic, putting together words and actions and grace, and although it does, I do know my sacramental theology that way, but proper understanding of sacramental is so let down by the way we sometimes interpret the church and just link it to the formula of words, the action, the person delivering it, and that invests far too much power in the clergy, to my mind. So let me give a quote that I also used this evening, which was from Daniel O'Leary, Daniel O'Donnell. You'd like that, wouldn't you? Daniel O'Leary, priest who lived a bit on the edge, I think, but again spoke so beautifully and eloquently about sacramental vision. He writes, sacramental vision is achieved not just with new spectacles, but with new eyes. Sacramental vision embraces what is there and intensifies its meaning. Sacramental vision celebrates reality and exposes its true nature. It diminishes nothing, only enhances everything. That is the artist's gift, to integrate, to bring together, to celebrate reality, to expose its true nature, to get under the skin. True art doesn't destroy, actually. It never diminishes anything. It enhances everything. It gives a voice to the voiceless. And again, it sounds like a eulogy, this, Sean, if you ever get to see this, but I'm just so grateful. And then at the end of Mass, we've been hearing the words of the St. Patrick's Blessed play, and the verse particularly I'm going to comment on was, Christ be in all hearts thinking about me. Christ be in all minds, Christ be in all hearts thinking, Christ be in all tongues telling of me. Christ be the vision in eyes that see me, in ears that hear me. Christ ever be. And the point I wanted us all to consider is that if we are to be the kind of Christian community to which we all aspire and all want to belong and all contribute to, incidentally, don't let me suggest otherwise, but it's a collective effort and it's a collective journey and a collective yearning to see Christ in each other, to set aside all prior, sometimes prejudices, or what we our opinions sometimes have to be rethought, reshaped, new insights learned, discovered, received as gift. And to my mind, Sean deserves acknowledgement for being somebody who, as I say, has helped me to speak to you in this way. Those of you who care to listen, and well, there we have it. Thank you, Sean, and so proud of you and your family, your mum, your brothers, your nan, and all those who've supported you. I wish you